All right, welcome to the AP podcast. This is Mike Shea. I've never done this on video before, so we're going to try this. I am here with somebody I've been wanting to sit down with for a while, actually, and he and I've talked about it, and the gods have made it happen, and now we are here together. I'm here with Andy Biersack, who's obviously the lead singer, but he's also the founder and the inspiration, the soul of Black Veil Brides, and Andy's got an amazing story, and he's also an incredible talent, and he's also a very legit dude, and I'm really happy you're here today.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
Fellow Ohioans kind of way. I don't know. Are you actually Cincinnati or more Kentucky side?
Well, I was born in Cincinnati. I spent most of my adolescence in Cincinnati. It wasn't until I got to be in bands that I really started to associate more with Kentucky, because in Cincinnati, there were no venues except for Bogart's, which was unattainable when you're young. So all the clubs were in Kentucky. And from I would say 14 until I moved out, I was always in Kentucky. I slept over there constantly, all my friends' houses. I wound up spending more time in Kentucky, so I started to kind of associate that way. But if I'm honest, I'm a Cincinnati, Ohio guy.
I think your Wikipedia page says you were born in Milwaukee.
Which is untrue, and I do not know why it says that. However, I make the joke every time we play in Milwaukee that I'm in my hometown show, so I wear a Brewers jersey, and for whatever reason, and people have changed it, and then someone keeps changing it back. But Wikipedia is just a mess of misinformation, that whole thing.
It is a mess of misinformation. But you know what? Everybody feels like they have a piece of you now.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, in Cleveland, the river, Cuyahoga River, divides the city, and the people on the west side of town act and think differently than the people on the east side of town. And I've heard that over the years that the music scenes are divided from Cincinnati and to Lexington and Covington and all that stuff. That is divided by that Ohio River. Mm-hmm. And have you noticed that? Like when you were starting out, you have like this rivalry going on. Like, oh, you're from the Ohio side.
It's not even it's the west side of Cincinnati, and then Kentucky is one thing. The river doesn't necessarily divide it. The east side of Cincinnati is where the affluent, rich sort of communities are, where there's an IKEA. Like the things that where I'm from seem insane, that are kind of commonplace. It's where the girls that I wanted to date were from, because they're better looking and they were more well kept, and they had nice cars and that kind of thing. The east side of Cincinnati is where, and that's actually where my dad grew up, on the east side of Cincinnati, before it became the east side of Cincinnati. And then he met my mom and they fell in love with the west side, because the west side's a little grittier. That's where my mom was from. And there's a lot more history on the west side. People are, there's a lot more stabbings, but there's also a lot more, fun. There's historical societies and all that. But no, the west side of Cincinnati and Kentucky are sort of one thing. And that's where you have the most angry people imaginable making music. And that's where you have terrible, Courage Crew straight edge bands that just can't string two notes together, but they just want to beat you up for smoking a cigarette. And that's where you have, through that, sometimes awesome things happen. So west side of Cincinnati is where Foxy Shazam is from. Mm-hmm. There were some cool bands that came out of there. There was, when I was younger, there's Close to Home and a few other bands that have done well in their careers. But it's always from that area. The east side bands tend to be the bands that go more, I guess it was just they were more musically talented. They had more money, so they could learn. They could go to music school and all that stuff. And they would never come down and play. There was a few. But they were, when that whole scene kid, emo kid thing started, that's where all those kids were from, because they could afford to go get the special jeans and the hair products to dye their hair a certain way and all that.
Right, they could afford Hot Topic.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks. Which there was no Hot Topics on the west side of Cincinnati.
No?
I would get all my clothes when I was a kid at a very sketchy place with a lip service catalog that I'd have to order it was it really was, because, and I try to explain this to people, when I was dressing and looking the way that I was as a kid in 2002, 2003, I was unaware of what was happening with the whole, from first to last and all that. I joke with Matt Good, who's been my friend for years, is that I had no idea that he was who he was. I just saw that as that wasn't me. I was into the Misfits, and I had this, and my hair was this way because of this, and I would go to this place called Sentiments, which was run by, I'm pretty sure, a drug dealer, and all of it was just, the bootleg, G.G. Allen shirts and everything, and I would save my money up, and I'd order TUK shoes and the lip service pants that you'd have to cut the straps off, or else you can't, because I guess they're meant for some function. I still have not figured out what. I think my best bet for that function is so that people can't escape during a fire very effectively. That's why you have the tie together, so you can just sort of jump. I don't know, is it sexual?
Death Trap would be a good clothing line name.
But yeah, so it wasn't until later that all that stuff started to come down west, and then that was around the time that I was getting older, and that's when like anyone who had any kind of, I guess, ingenuity. I saw there was a Hot Topic that was built in our neighborhood, and I saw all these kids start doing this and dressing this way. And I'm like, look, I don't like the music that you like, but I'm pretty sure that there's something about what I do that you'll understand. So I'm never going to make the Under Oath, that kind of stuff that you guys are all listening to, but I feel like there's something about like, here, check this out. Look at what I'm doing. And that's when I would, make covers of Alkaline Trio songs or whatever. And like, look at this. Do you like this? I know you like that, but like, look at
So you always felt like you were a step ahead of them, or you were trying to stay a step ahead of where the rest of the crowd was going.
No, I just hated it. I didn't like it. I was too, all the reasons that people hate us now, I understand, because when I was a kid, I couldn't imagine anything that could be worse than Good Charlotte or Simple Plan or all these bands that were popular, because to me it was like, you're offending Rancid or whatever, all these things that I had such strong beliefs for someone who knew nothing as a kid. Like, I knew what punk rock was. I'm a kid from Cincinnati. I didn't know what punk rock was to save my life, but I thought I did. And so I had that hatred for popularity and things that were, if a girls liked it, I was like, which now is so ridiculous, by the way, because the only girls that I wanted to be with anyway would have only liked me because of the bands that I liked. But that's a whole separate thing I didn't realize till I got older.
Self-defeating in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I'm like, I should have been going like, oh, you like Good Charlotte? They're popular? I'm the weird looking kid. I could cachet this, but no, never paid attention to that. So when I was younger, it was really about, I couldn't understand the like little girl whiny voice with the braid, like all this stuff that's still amazingly still so prevalent. I never understood it. And it wasn't about making something better or it was just, I felt like there was a way that I could do music that was genuine to what I wanted to do that would still appeal to those people, but I didn't have to pander. I didn't want to try to do that. And as a kid, I had no idea what I was doing. I was not a good songwriter. It wasn't until recently that I even learned how to write songs in terms of structure. Our first record has no bridges on it because I didn't know how to write a bridge. I just go, well, I'll just yell here. That's what I do because I don't know how to. The only reason we ever had screaming in the band is because I had no idea how to write a bridge. That's God's honest truth. And I've told people this before. People are like, why don't you bring back the screaming? I learned how to write a song. The only reason that was there was because I was too chicken shit to try to figure out how to write a separate section on the song. But having said that, as a kid, I had all these ambitions, and you want to do all that. You want to sound like the Misfits meets Motley Crue. It's what, like all this stuff. And,
you were your inspirations. Your first few releases, especially your first one, is basically you paying tribute to all your idols.
Right.
So, because you were you really a one-man army, like at that point, or did you kind of have a posse of like other kids that kind of looked up to you or that hung out with you, and like you guys were like the cool kids? Like,
no, it went in phases. So when I was really young, I had the strangest of posses. I grew up in the first neighborhood that we lived in until we moved. I was one of maybe 5 white kids in my school. It was a very predominantly black, very oppressed area. And I got along super well because the one thing that in my life I've always had is that I was always a little different. And those kids, this is right around the time where Cincinnati had race riots, and young black kids were getting treated like shit by like important white people. Cops hated them. I associated with that. So I got along well with, more than anything else, I got along really well with like young, angry black kids. And that was my whole thing as a kid. So all my friends were like, there were a couple black kids who found Metallica. So they were suddenly interested in like, the white kid who had the Kiss t-shirt. Like, what is that? And so they'd come over to my house. So my friend group was either special needs kids that were being treated like shit by everybody that I was a friend to, or young black kids who were more angry, who found Body Count or something and were more angry than the kids that were listening to Shaggy, and they wanted to know what's the heavy metal thing. And that's really all I had when I was super young. And then when we moved to the neighborhood that my parents still live in now, that was when I became, there were no black. And actually the first day that we got there, the woman who lived next to us, she found out where we were from, and she goes, well, thank God we got you away from all those black kids. And we were like, what? Because I couldn't imagine that anybody would have. To me, racism seemed crazy because I didn't have it, and I learned that through the Catholic world that I was in. I learned racism, bigotry, all the things that I was unaware of as a little kid, because people don't realize that in neighborhoods that are not, it doesn't matter. Like I couldn't. When you don't have a lot of money or whatever else, like it's amazing to me that anybody would ever, they don't put it as a forethought. If someone's black or gay or whatever else, like it's not the things there that you don't choose that. So that's what you are. It's fine. That's what it doesn't matter because of, there's so much shit around you. Why would you ever want to focus on something that someone can't help anyway? And it's their life and it's their business. And that's when money and religion and power and all the things that allow for comfort come in. Then you can start to pick and choose the things that you want. I was completely unaware of that until I became maybe 11 years old and I saw all this. And that's when I became immediately detached from everybody, because I didn't know why, but I hated all this. I didn't want to be around this. And I couldn't put my finger on it until later, but that's when I became detached from the religious aspect of everything. I was always in trouble. That's when the James Dean kid thing came in, where I was complete, smoking cigarettes outside of school, like rebel kid, wanted to be different. That's when I found like real punk rock in my estimation for me. Like that's when I found like Lords of the New Church and Dead Boys and The Damned and all that stuff, because it was more aggressive than, because I had heard Misfits stuff when I was a kid, but it was, Michael Graves era Misfits was a little bit more Saturday night and poppy, and it was more palatable to like a kid that liked Kiss and stuff. But then the aggression as of getting older, then I wanted to listen to other stuff. And then that's when I got into like early AFI, and that was because it was right around the time that Art of Drowning came out. I didn't know anything about that band, but I was like, oh, hey, this is Misfits meets Damn Angry, like this is what I want to do. So
updated.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when I became so into all that. So in terms of friends, I started out social, and then part of the result of the environment I was in, and then also my own choice to be detached, I became completely solitary. And I mean like nobody. And it never even, in all the pictures that I've shown you guys of like stuff I built and everything, it never dawned on me that there was other people outside. And my dad always teased me that girls would stand outside of our house.
Even though the internet was around.
Right. Well, we had a dial-up computer. I never used it. Girls, my dad would tease me. I was unaware girls would stand outside while I was singing, and they'd be like, listening to me sing, and they thought it was interesting, but I couldn't care. I'd sing in my room, and that's all I wanted to do.
They'd be standing outside your bedroom, or you mean outside your window?
Outside our house, because they could hear me through the bedroom window. And I don't believe him, but to this day he says they were. And I think it's funny because in a way it shows that I would have loved to talk to girls, but I was like, I don't care. I'm going to be, the kid. I have to hone my skills and be whatever I wanted to be. And because you have to understand also that I was angry at this point, like a lot of kids, and it was a great time to be angry, because there are phases in America where there's political situations that are happening where if you know nothing about politics, you can still hook on to something. And I, like a lot of kids, hooked on to the Bush administration as, I can hate this. And it was a great time to hate something.
It was a great administration for punk rock.
Exactly. And you had on television, you had The Daily Show was at its height. And I've always had a deep love of comedy, stand-up comedy. Most people don't know that I don't listen to a lot of music. I listen to a lot more stand-up comedy that I listen to.
Who's your favorites before we digress? I don't want to digress too far down this, but who's your favorites? Just curious.
I used to be really into the more aggressive, like Bill Hicks, the more aggressive stuff. Oh,
sure.
But, the older I get, I like just funny stuff. That's why I like Louis C.K. But, Bill Hicks, David Cross, Louis, Patton Oswalt's always been great. I like Paul F. Tompkins. Just the basic kind of that early 90s alternative comedian scene, the Mr. Show dudes and everything.
Because you did the Funny or Die thing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if that was something, this connection there, like we're going to see more of that somewhere down the road maybe? You're going to start?
I write stand-up sometimes. My cousin does stand-up sets, and I write some of his sets.
Really?
Like, I'm not... Everybody that I know in the comedy community always tells me I should do stand-up just because to do it for the first time. But I'm too, like, the thing I always tell people, nobody wants to fucking see me do comedy, man. Like, nobody... That's... You know what I mean? Like, the reason I love comedians is that there's something about them that is so much more vulnerable. And like, there's something about a guy who is sweating his ass off and, 70 pounds overweight and is angry than like the skinny rock and roll guy. Like, nobody gives a shit about my problems. Like, it doesn't, even if I am genuine, an audience isn't going to read that. I can go on stage and give aggression and anger, and then I can also smile at people on stage and make them feel empowered. But I can't do that in comedy. So I don't know how. That's why I like doing the improv bits like we do with the show that I produce with my cousin, or writing stand up for stuff he does or friends do, because I can still get that out, but it's not disingenuous. And the one thing I hate, regardless of whether it's self-inflicted or not, is something that's super disingenuous.
It's interesting that because usually a singer, it sometimes can be kind of like that is their world, and they'll get pulled into doing acting, they'll get pulled into other things where they'll be performing, but they still singing, and there's just something about that world that is very comforting to them, and it's not just familiar, but there's just something like, I know I can control this, but outside that I can't control it.
We haven't done anything about it yet, but my cousin and I are writing a screenplay that based on what's funny is, okay, so he will. We like to view the communities, because he's involved in the comedy community in LA and I'm a musician, and we like to cross the two things. Like I brought Danny came in and did from Ask Alexandria, did an episode on, like, I like to bring people in from our world, and guys in my band have done it. But we always joke that if in the music world that has had success comes in and works on our show, that's immediately the best thing in the episode everybody talks about. But the ancillary people in the show who have been struggling for years in acting and went to AMDA and all this, nobody cares that they're there. So, and it's not because they aren't, it's just that there's the nature of fans of music is a little bit more passionate.
Yeah, sure.
So we're working on a screenplay about the idea that it's a kind of a fictionalized version of both of us, where it's a documentary crew. We're following two people, and you don't realize that they're involved at all until the middle. But it basically starts with following the life of this stand-up who's struggling and failing, and playing the fucking Red Lobster or whatever, and nobody pays attention. And then it cuts to me. My character is just sitting one day in a room and eating popcorn, and I think I'd like to do stand up. And then immediately it's just like Russell Brand style. I'm on the billboards and people love it. I don't do stand up at all. I just go and tell jokes, but I'm just cool and everybody loves it. And then you just keep cutting back and forth, and then eventually you realize these people are related and they've had the same genetic makeup, but for some reason one person was able to just always push ahead, which to me that's what makes a comedian funny, is when they're never able just to get to, and this is why Dane Cook wasn't able to keep anything in my estimation, because I think a lot of Dane Cook jokes were funny. I know that people thought he was cheesy or whatever, but I think there has to be a struggle for someone to love a comedian. In the same way that a punk rock band, Anti-Flag or somebody, has to have a struggle. And when that struggle is gone, it's very hard for people to continue to be so passionate about them.
Well, plus, I think there could be something debated that the comedian can't be the heartthrob. Right. And I think when they started marketing Dane Cook as this hot, single sexy guy and stuff, I think is when it started falling apart for him, because you can't be that perfect. You have to be you have to be the nerd. You have to be the one that's slightly defective, or the one that never really gets the girl in the end and stuff like that. I mean, they all want the Chaplin ending, going down the street with the girl, but that's very few and far between.
Can't do it because it ruins the reason why Woody Allen is still making movies and all this is because there's a certain, you have to understand something. You can't be, they always have to, and this is the one thing about comedy that I love more than anything that not a lot of people understand, is you always have to be the fool, no matter what it is. And I hate whenever when Joe and I will do a scene where I have to be the straight guy, because I know that I'm not getting the laugh there. And that's why I don't mind debasing myself. I'm a terrible version of myself in that show because I love being the fool.
Could you ever seriously mock yourself?
I think the only distinction between seeing what I like when I'm playing myself in this show, it's that a 1 degree of separation, because it's still the character version of myself. The version of me that's an average Joe would do that, but I think it'd be a lot harder to try to directly go in a route of making a spoof on who I really am, because it's a little too sacred in a way. And
it's like that movie This Is the End that came out, and all the actors were coming in and basically making fun of themselves in a way, and it kind of brought in humility a lot for them. And if you read the Rotten Tomatoes reviews for that movie, all the actors get a lot of props for basically saying, wow, they actually made fun of themselves, or their persona.
But that's a little bit even closer, and that's why I would agree that I would give them some form of props, so to speak, because it's not even, if what I'm doing in my little show is it's still a version of me. The audience knows that I'm not getting girls knocked up and killing them and sending them to Mexico. The audience knows that I don't have a drug addiction. The audience knows that these are all things that you take as read going in, whereas we don't. The audience watching This Is the End, there's plenty of people who don't know whether or not, they Jonah Hill is such a big, you don't know. And that's what I really loved about that, was they took it as, this might be the real version of these people. Right. And not to say that, it's still a wink and a little bit of a slapstick thing, but it's still a look behind the curtain enough, which is something that I've never done that I think would be interesting.